dear ladies and gentlemen. I wish to express our warm welcome and gratitude to all of you today at our special event marking the upcoming of said milestone, where we are hoping to provide a renewed focus on the situation and endeavors of Ukrainian authorities at a time when public attention in Europe and around the world has reportedly been diminishing. We thank Her Excellency Ambassador Haputlian and the US Embassy in Ljubljana in Slovenia for the support of this special event and their recognition of our work done so far. We saw it timely to address the Slovenian public before we pass the second year mark of Russia's full-scale invasion on Ukraine next week. We wish to enrich the public discussion and narrative by highlighting the unwavering determination of Ukrainian people to continue with sustainable, transformative, and inclusive reconstruction in Ukraine, all despite the impact of the ongoing aggression. Center for European Perspective has been contributing to the sphere of local reconstruction and development, supported by the Slovenian Ministry of Foreign and European Affairs through Slovenian Aid and Partnership Program. We continue to build on existing and establishing new sustainable intermunicipal partnership, focusing on the empowerment of Ukrainian partners in the field of reconstruction, development, and their complex tasks ahead. Mutual trust and friendships, which have been demonstrated time and time again, are the cornerstone of our endeavors. It is here and now that Ukraine needs help the most. Reconstruction will be an enormous task, and Ukraine cannot manage it alone, and neither can the EU. It can only be achieved by the entire global community, which is now providing its support to Ukraine. We're therefore grateful for the support and the excellent response from all of you as well. I would like to express our special gratitude to Madam Minister Fajon and our special guest from Ukraine, Minister Azarkina, for honoring this event with their presence. The same goes for all the distinguished speakers, including the Ukrainian students from Slovenia who will conclude today's event by discussing the situation and ongoing efforts in Ukraine from the perspective of Ukrainian youth. Last but not least, our special gratitude goes also to Mayor Cvirkun from Perečepinsk Hromada for personally coming to Slovenia. His great ordeal on his 38-hour journey to Slovenia reminds us that working in circumstances that Ukraine is under involves challenges and risks, and we try to meet them as best as we can each and every time. So welcome to Jable. I wish you an interesting day, and it's my honor to give the floor to Madam Minister Tanja Fajon.
Good morning, dear Excellencies, dear panelists, dear ladies and gentlemen. 722 days have passed since Russia launched a full-scale invasion against Ukraine. 722 days of unspeakable human suffering and nationwide destruction. 722 days too many. Sadly, despite the wide international condemnation and persistent appeals to Russia to stop the aggression, the war continues to rage, along with its devastating consequences, especially for the civilian population. Slovenia strongly condemns the Russian unprovoked and illegal aggression against Ukraine and applauds the relentless bravery and resolve of the Ukrainian nation to defend the independence, sovereignty and territorial integrity of its homeland. By invading a sovereign state, Russian aggression profoundly changed the global geopolitical landscape and faced us with the bitter fact that even the most sacred principles of international community cannot be taken for granted anymore. This is unacceptable. There should be no alternative to respect of the UN Charter, and Slovenia will spare no effort in its defense. Moreover, by sitting at the table of the United Nations Security Council, we will not let the discussions about the Russian aggression become business as usual. We will keep urging Russia to uphold the international values and norms to which it committed, and we will not get tired. There is too much at stake. Allow me also to say one thing. When I say Russia, I mean the Putin's regime and its supporters. We know that there are still many Russians that are against this war and want to see peace. We will continue to strive for a just and lasting peace in Ukraine. Slovenia supports collective efforts based on Ukraine peace formula and is actively participating in its activities. We wish that hard work will soon result in concrete proposals that will enable us to materialize peace prospects. At the same time, stable security support must continue. Nevertheless, peace cannot be brought to Ukraine unless justice is served. As responsible members of the international community, we must make sure that the horrible crimes committed by the Russian Federation against Ukraine and its people do not go unpunished. Russia must be held accountable for atrocities in Ukraine and compensate for the destruction. It makes me proud that Slovenia has already contributed to this end. Taking this opportunity, let me recall the Ljubljana Hague Convention that can be used to address some existing legal voids when guiding the global fight against impunity. Just 2 days ago, I solemnly signed the convention in Hague, which is now open for signatories to all states. Ladies and gentlemen, 2 years ago, Russia attempted to shatter the European aspirations of the Ukrainian nation and deprive a sovereign state of its inherent right to choose their own destiny and future path. Fortunately, it did not succeed. On the contrary, the Ukrainian will to join our European family has never been stronger. Its commitment to uphold the European values, never more resolute. The European Union heard the call of history and responded decisively by opening its doors to Ukraine. I'm nothing but convinced that Ukraine will seize the window of opportunity and follow with the necessary reforms, focusing on the core principles of the EU project: the rule of law, pluralistic democracy, and the respect for human rights. As Ukraine continues to make tremendous efforts and progress on this long and arduous road to the EU, Slovenia, as a staunch supporter of the EU enlargement, remains committed to stand by its side. Looking ahead, sustainable transformation of Ukraine is not only a backbone of the EU integration path, it is also an indispensable prerequisite for transparent, inclusive and effective post-war reconstruction and recovery. As Ukraine rebuilds its homes, schools, hospitals, as it restores its critical infrastructure and economy, ensuring predictable and trustworthy environment will be crucial to match the expectations of international partners. Therefore, the EU integration process and reconstruction should go hand in hand, creating synergies and maximizing the impact to the benefit of every single Ukrainian. Given the complexity of the task, along with immense and growing reconstruction costs, it is clear that only united and coordinated international support can meet the Ukrainian needs. Slovenia strongly welcomes the recent agreement on the Ukraine facility, a new single dedicated instrument that will allow us to channel consistent, predictable, and flexible support to the country. At the same time, we look forward to joining our efforts with our partners and allies around the globe. Slovenia is and will be actively participating as Ukraine fights for freedom and rebuilds a democratic, resilient, and prosperous society. It is our responsibility and it is our moral duty. To this end, Slovenia doubled its humanitarian assistance to Ukraine in 2023 and continued to provide material and development aid, focusing on urgent humanitarian response, refugees, emergency equipment, children. Slovenia also contributed to projects on the ground, such as reconstruction of the City Hospital in Izium through Olena Zelenska Foundation, and helped mitigate the impact of the war on global food security through allocating funds to Grain from Ukraine initiative. Last but not least, Slovenia continues to support Ukraine's reconstruction and recovery efforts via multi-year projects implemented by ITF, enhancing human security, recognizing enormous needs of Ukraine as the most mined country in the world. We allocated, at the end of last year, additional 1.5 million euros to the government of Ukraine to support humanitarian demining activities. In the coming years, Slovenia will be continuously looking into further possibilities to provide support to Ukraine, ranging from established projects to building new partnerships, including by attracting private sector and institutions. As today's event takes place at the center of European Perspective, a long-trusted partner of our ministry, I would like to finish my address by saying a few words about its contribution to the post-conflict reconstruction of Ukraine. Center of European Perspective is currently carrying out an exchange program among representatives of Slovenian and Ukrainian local communities. And I'm very delighted to hear that the project supported by the Ministry of Foreign and European Affairs and implemented under the ULEAD program is growing and building new partnerships between the Slovenian and Ukrainian municipalities. Sharing expertise in the field of local development, protection of environment, and re-establishment of economic activities will empower local communities and help them develop their own reconstruction processes tailored to the needs of local population. We could not imagine a better implementing partner than the Center for European Perspective, which has a long history of experience in this field. Ladies and gentlemen, Slovenia is standing shoulder to shoulder with Ukraine since the first day of the war. We will continue to stand by its side to the best of our ability, also in 2024 and beyond. As the war continues to take unimaginable toll, our hearts and minds remain with Ukrainian people, keeping a simple wish that this year brings just and lasting peace to Ukraine and allows its nation to shape its future again. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Minister Fajon. Dear ladies and gentlemen, esteemed guests, Your Excellencies, let me extend a warm welcome from myself to all of you coming here today. We are glad that you've joined us because we are going to dive into some very important discussions. Whether you are with us here in person or joining us online, together we'll explore topics that matter deeply, aiming to share insights and also learn from each other. So thank you for being part of the vital exchange. Russia's war in Ukraine, as Minister Fajon said, is nearly 2 years old. The issue of this war is complex with many important aspects that need our attention. Today we'll talk about a subject that extends beyond mere reconstruction, about rebuilding Ukraine. The roundtable isn't so much going to be about evaluating the past. It's going to be about shaping a future where resilience, reform, and integration are not just ideals, but realities. Our discussion will highlight the burgeoning connections at regional and local levels, spotlighting intriguing international projects and partnerships that are shaping the future. And we have excellent guests here with us today, coming from various positions they hold, fields of knowledge, insights, and experience. So let me introduce them to you. First with us online is Madam Oleksandra Azarkina. I hope we'll be able to see her soon. She is the Deputy Minister for Communities at the Ministry for Communities, Territories, and Infrastructure Development of Ukraine. And then let me continue at that end. Dr. Klemen Groschel, he's a member of the European Parliament for Slovenia. Dr. Damir Črnčec, he is a State Secretary at the Ministry of Defense of the Republic of Slovenia. Her Excellency, Your Excellency, Madam Jamie L. Harputlian, she is the United States Ambassador to the Republic of Slovenia. Thank you for joining us, and with us also Ambassador Andriy Taran, Ambassador of Ukraine to the Republic of Slovenia. So thank you very much to all of you for joining us. Let me just check, do we have the Deputy Minister Azarkina with us? We do, okay. Madam Azarkina, I know you have a very busy schedule, and thank you very much for joining us today. As I mentioned, would like to start, as I mentioned, that we are going to talk about rebuilding Ukraine. Would it be possible for you, if you can hear us? No? Okay. Yeah, we tested the connection, so she was with us a while ago, but we'll try again. Let's continue then with our interlocutors here at Grad Jable. Maybe to start with the US ambassador. So we are going to talk about rebuilding Ukraine. That's high on the agenda of the US. Could you talk to us a bit about the understanding of the US in terms of reconstruction of Ukraine and how to help?
Yes, and thank you for inviting me here today. I vividly remember...
Could you just take a microphone? Yeah, thank you very much. Thank you.
How's that?
Oh, better.
How's that? Better?
Yeah.
Okay. I vividly remember February 24th, and it was a very shocking day. And ever since then, Ukrainians have been very bravely fighting back against Putin, despite profound challenges. I will say this, that the day after the invasion, February 25th, President Biden stepped forward with a $300 million tranche of aid, and that was just the beginning. Since then, over the last 2 years, the United States has donated over $75 billion to support the defense of Ukraine, and I can break that down. It's humanitarian aid in the amount of about $3 billion. Also, humanitarian aid in the form of ordnance removal, and that's about $185 million that we've contributed. Also, for essential operations in Ukraine, we've donated about $27 billion to keep schools going, hospitals going, government operating. And also, of course, security assistance, $44 billion. But to address your question, we have been focused on helping Ukraine push Putin back beyond the territory of Ukraine. Our humanitarian aid and the aid that I mentioned in ordnance removal, of course, is critical for moving forward with reconstruction because it's so dangerous to have that. It needs to be removed so that reconstruction can begin. So that is definitely a step forward. But I would say now is not the time to walk away. Now is more critical than ever for the defense of Ukraine's freedom, its democracy, and its territory. And it's important that we continue our momentum. And I would say here that we were able to develop a coalition of more than 50 countries who together donated more than 100 billion for Ukraine's defense. So we want to keep that coalition united. We want to keep our defense united, and we must be able to stop Putin. I mean, that is the goal. On reconstruction, we are ready and able to support as soon as Ukraine is ready, but we need to get Ukraine in the position where it's ready to start those efforts.
Mm-hmm.
Thank you.
Thank you, too. I was just informed that Deputy Minister Azarkina unfortunately won't be able to join us. There were some flight scheduling issues, but would like to therefore continue with you, Ambassador Taran. I was hoping that Deputy Minister Azarkina would be able to explain to us the concept of reconstruction. That will be your job now. Because the reconstruction, at first glance, someone might think of rebuilding back the buildings that have been damaged due to bombs and stuff like that. Could you explain to us it's more complex how you see it, right? Yeah, it's working, yeah.
Okay. Reconstruction is wider than just rebuilding. First of all, let me tell you about the consequences of that terrible war for the population. At the beginning of our independence, the number of population in Ukraine was 51.7 million people. After the occupation of Crimea and Donbass, there are left just 37 million people. The rest were pushed to flee from the occupied territories, or they stayed in the occupied territories, so the population in Ukraine was decreased significantly. Now, according to the estimations of Ukrainian government and some estimations made by some Western institutions, we have about, from different numbers, from 25 up to 34 million people. So the economy is suffering. The people are suffering. It was about 6 million people, very modest estimation, who left the territory of Ukraine. It is about the same number, about 6 million people, who became internally displaced persons. These numbers shows the impact to Ukraine, to our economy, to our people, as a result of Russian invasion. Let me just remind you that we are going to commemorate 2 years of full-scale war in Ukraine. But please do not forget that the invasion started in 2014 with the occupation of Crimea and with the occupation of Donbass. What was done on those territories, you know, from the mass media sources, you have seen movies, you have seen documentaries, you have seen photos. Many correspondents told about what's going on, what are the results on the ground. So in order to restore Ukraine, to bring it back to the situation which was before the invasion, before the aggression of Russia, it needs time and it needs a lot of efforts. So it is just not about to rebuild some buildings. It's about the restoration of the country.
Exactly, because the numbers that you shared are really terrible. How does one start even thinking of where to start with the reconstruction? Because you still have to deal with the war, with the tanks, with the bombs, with the devastation that hit your country. Where do you start?
There are several directions, actually, for recovery. It was a conference, an international conference in London, where the representatives of many countries were able to hear what we are going to do. The reconstruction plan was presented by the Prime Minister in Switzerland, in Davos, Prime Minister Schmegal, and there are several directions for this recovery of Ukraine. There are intention to rebuild or to recover the energy infrastructure, which is suffering most of all, especially last winter, when Russians tried to eliminate the ability of Ukrainian population to be connected to the power, to the electricity, without warm in their houses, without heating abilities for their families. So this is very important direction for recovery. Then many industrial objects were also destroyed by Russian missile and air bombing. So we need to recover the economy because only the economy will allow people to come back to peaceful life. Without the economical background, it would be impossible to imagine how to live further.
Thank you so much. We'll talk about also the projects that Ukraine is working with municipalities here in Slovenia. Dr. Črnčec, could you talk a bit about the efforts of the Slovenian army when it comes to helping Ukraine, not only in terms of the military assistance, but also other means of help? I know there are numerous things. I heard of Slovenian army teaching English to Ukrainians, but could you please share some examples of how is the Slovenian army involved in the reconstruction of Ukraine?
Thank you very much. I'm very glad that we have on this sad occasion this event here. As Madam Minister described in depth all the full spectrum of Slovenian efforts that we are doing for Ukraine, and the military or defense part of it is also very important. Yes, we are talking about reconstruction, we are talking about future reconciliation, but the fact is, and of course when we talk to our Ukrainian counterparts, it's very simple. For the time being, the most important part is of course security, military assistance. And unfortunately this is going to sustain for the time being for sure. And realistically, of course, to talk about reconstruction, rebuilding the country that is at war, it's an effort in post-war time. What we are doing now, of course, and also we are doing here in SEP and Slovenia, doing a small part of it, helping, training, educating, facilitating, but building on the ground in the times when the long-range missiles are arriving, it's not an effort that can be done actually. This is reality on the ground. We also sent from MOD a team in eastern part of Ukraine, how to rebuild maybe a medical center, medical facility with a shelter, and this is one of the exact concrete projects through our civil-military cooperation. While going to the military side of it, we are participating in European Union mission in support of Ukraine. Majority of our military effort, training, educating, facilitating Ukrainian armed forces is done in Germany with, of course, our German partners within this EU framework. As you know, this was approved by Slovenian government and, of course, through the process within the parliament. And of course, you mentioned the language trainings, the SEP trainings. We are also supporting MOD, the capabilities within the SEP and POTC as a part of SEP to support Ukraine. But as it was mentioned by Mr. Ambassador, looking on the size of the country that is 30 times bigger than Slovenia, 5-6-folded the territory of Slovenia is under occupation right now. So these are the numbers we are talking about. And demographic part we heard of. Sadly, the real precondition to start rebuilding process is to have permanent peace on the ground. Not only small ceasefire, but really a strong, lasting peace on the ground. As you know, we are supporting the Ukrainian territorial integrity and sovereignty. This can be done only through the means of war. What is the situation in the areas or contact areas on the ground we are seeing through the media, and it's going to take some time to see conditions on the ground to do the real reconstruction process. In the meantime, of course, as it was said already, we are supporting financially with humanitarian aid, with demining equipment, with all these capabilities that we have in Slovenia. And I'm keen to say that Slovenia, being a small country, we are punching about our belt with what we are doing for Ukraine.
Just curious, when people from the Ministry of Defense or the Slovenian army go to Ukraine to various missions and coming back to Slovenia, what are they saying? When you have debriefings, what are they conveying? What sort of messages?
I've been myself 2 times in Ukraine in the time of war, and our missions on the ground, who were basically the facts-finding missions, spoke with local actors, with the people from municipalities, from the Ministry of Defense, from different ministries, to identify on the ground exact projects, how our aid or assistance can be implemented on the ground. And one of our teams went to the, as I said, to the eastern part, near the front lines, with the project whether to help in the schooling system or in the healthcare system, but it was agreed on the ground for the time being to invest there to start a reconstruction on the ground, while the area or the city is under permanent threat of the Russian missile and artillery attacks. It's not the right thing to do. So we are going to do deeper into the Ukrainian territory. We are going to identify exact projects, how to help people on the ground. And we are, of course, open to the suggestions, because through this model of civil-military assistance that we can provide through the MOD, we are using also the Ukrainians who are living in Slovenia, the translators, and we are using different experts who are not part of the Ministry of Defense, who are not employees of Ministry of Defense, but they went through this program of ours, and we can use them as a specialist for the special missions on the ground.
Dr. Groschel, EU recently approved 50 billion in aid to Ukraine. It wasn't easy, but it was done in the end. There are loans and grants that are aimed to, designed to help Ukraine build and recover. Now, why that kind of money is important for Ukraine is obvious. Could you talk to us a bit about why it's important for the EU to support Ukraine in that way?
Yeah, good morning. I would say that European Union did actually fairly well the whole story with the Russian invasion of Ukraine, because we need to keep in mind that if Ukraine was the primarily target, European Union was the secondary target. What is important to stress is that the European Union maintained the unity, because one of the strategic idea behind all this invasion was to split European Union, to not to have a unified response, and this was something which surprised practically everyone, including some of the member states and some of the members of the European Parliament. We were faced with the energy crisis, as you might remember. I would also say that we did quite well. If you look now, the prices of the energy are now on the level of below the level of what was before the invasion. So the European Union, in this sense, did quite a good job. I remember as being one of the chief negotiators on the strategic reserves of the natural gas. This proved that European Union is very resilient. It can deliver. There were some discussions, but this is the nature of the European Union because it's still a democratic society. You know, this is something which differs us from Russia. You know, I'm very happy that there are discussions. There are some also critical views. This proves us that we are still what we need to be, a democracy. So on the support of the Ukraine, it is not only the military support, it's also the support of the accession process. It is important to stress that European Union started the accession process with Ukraine and Moldova. This was also another sign of strength, not of weakness of the European Union. It also proved that European Union is able to deliver despite some differences among member states. I know there is discussion about Hungary. I would like to say that, you know, Hungary is not Orban and Orban is not Hungary. There is also other political forces. What makes me very happy at the moment is that there are some cracks in this monolithic political system we are facing in Hungary. But at the end, nevertheless, the major issue and I would say the major success is that we finally delivered this package.
Just to interrupt you a bit, looking from afar, it doesn't look that Hungary is other than Orban.
Yeah, that's perhaps a little bit wrong perception because there are political movements. You have quite a lot of people who are not very happy with what's going on in Hungary. If you follow what was going on last year and this year, there are protests. Of course, you cannot expect these protests to be seen in the national TV or in the national TV channels in Hungary for obvious reasons. But I think there are some major issues coming up, and I think that mechanisms which European Union developed to protect its own democracy, this conditionality to the European funds, they are slowly taking place and they do have some results, as we can see and follow those who are following what individual representatives of the former representatives or active representatives of Hungarian government are writing on Facebook. So there are some movements. But I would say it's also important to stress that it showed that this war is not only about Ukraine, as I pointed out at the beginning, it's also about the future of the European Union. I would say that we won one part of the battle. I would say the biggest one is ahead of us. I'm not that pessimistic about the elections in the European Parliament as some are, because I see that I still believe that there will be a clear-cut majority which will be pro-European, and there will be no discussions about supporting Ukraine. And I think that we need to open this political space and discussion a little bit more wider also in Slovenia. I know it's not popular, and me as a politician, I should be, some are saying a little bit more careful in my statements, but nevertheless. Some are saying about the military support. And there is this huge elephant in the room which is not popular in Slovenia. We should remind our compatriots that we had examples in the Western Balkans when there was arms embargo, and there were results of this arms embargo. You know, and these results are still present in the Western Balkans. One of the results of the arms embargo was what happened in Srebrenica. I know this causes a lot of discomfort, also in this room, also in Slovenia, in wider EU area, but that's the result of the arms embargo. So now, when talking about this military support we are offering to Ukraine, which is essential, I would say, and more than just to do it, we should also take into account what happens if there is no this kind of support, because we have these examples.
Thank you. You are both with Dr. Chernchets emphasizing the need to win first in the war, but they in Ukraine don't have the luxury of waiting for other things to happen. So Ambassador Taran, could you describe to us, because there is also with the Center for European Perspective quite lively goings on when it comes to connections between Ukrainian municipalities and municipalities here in Slovenia. Could you describe what is going on? What kind of projects are these?
Let me start with expressing our Ukrainian sincere gratitude for the support we are getting, first of all. Speaking about the money which were spent by the world community for Ukraine, we received, according to the calculations made by our Western partners, we received $174 billion for Ukraine. From that amount, after the beginning of full-scale war, from that amount, only 40% were spent for military assistance. 50% of that assistance was spent for financial assistance, and 10% was spent for humanitarian assistance. We appreciate all the countries which were providing us with such an assistance at the governmental level. We are grateful for Slovenia. We are grateful for the US, which is the biggest contributor to assistance for Ukraine. And we appreciate all the efforts which were done by European Union. It was done at the governmental level. But please do not forget that the first aid we received in Bucha, famous name, sad and famous name of our Ukrainian village. The first aid arrived from municipality, Slovenia municipality, Kochevia.
Coming from Kochevia, thank
Yes.
you.
Then it was assistance coming from Shkofia Loka. So municipality reacts much faster than the government, first. Second, municipality knows what to do in order to support life in their region. There is a successful project from Maribor, between Maribor and Kharkiv municipality. They have not waited for the end of the war. They already started to provide an assistance for recovery in Kharkiv. There are some projects, and Slovenia is very active in Kharkiv region to provide their support for recovery of Kharkiv Oblast. And Maribor already sent the first bus to Kharkiv. There is a project of rebuilding of some hospitals in Kharkiv Oblast. Provided the assistance was provided not only by the government but also by the municipalities. There are many successful projects. It was a European initiative, Bridges for Trust. It started by European Union before the war, and there were about 20 plus Slovenian municipalities who came to Ukraine, who established contacts and started cooperation with Ukrainian municipalities.
And what sort of knowledge are you looking for from the municipalities in Slovenia? What's most in demand?
I cannot say what is the most demanded from Ukraine. Any kind of support, any kind of ideas which are born after as a result of cooperation between municipalities are useful for Ukraine. Just recently, it was a delegation from Bucha here once again about Bucha, from municipality of Bucha here in Slovenia. They stayed here about 3 weeks, and we have a new representative from Ukraine, from municipality of Ukraine, coming here. We are looking what business ideas might be useful for Ukraine. Like, for example, in case of Bucha, they found very interesting idea from Kochevia to create a business incubator. The place for startups, the place where businesses can gather, discuss, generate, and implement the new ideas without starting a new businesses, without rebuilding the economy in the regions, in the municipalities. It is impossible even to imagine that people can continue to live in peace and prosperity in this region. So the municipalities know what is most necessary for them. In different municipalities, there are different needs. Like, for example, it was a successful project in Ukraine with one of the municipalities where it was a need for Drogobuch. It was a need for place where internally displaced persons can live. That place was, with the assistance of Slovenian municipality, was created, and displaced persons were able to live in the region freely, with no restrictions, and to do what they can to raise the economy in Drogobuch. Without that assistance from the municipality of Slovenia, it was very difficult to restore to establish such a facility. So municipality, in every case, they know their needs, and there is general need. Let's restore the economy.
You said 20 municipalities are connected. About 20.
Were connected before the war.
Okay.
After the war, due the results of the war, right now we have 14.
14.
Yes.
Thank you. Ambassador Harpotlian, the US's support for Ukraine has been massive so far. One of the strongest assets that US has in the world is its soft power. So I'm wondering, how does the US support the civil society and the democratic institutions in Ukraine?
Well, we're doing that, as I mentioned, with humanitarian aid and also essential operations at this point in time. I think what Secretary Turnshit said about the appropriate time to start building is quite accurate. So no, are we ready to start building new buildings? No, but hospitals, essential operations that are needed to help them continue their defense of their territory is absolutely essential. And I can only say that the monetary donations we've made, we've got NGOs on the ground assisting Ukrainians. It's quite substantial. Go ahead.
Being an ambassador, U.S. ambassador in Slovenia, I wonder, I don't know, on a daily or on a weekly, monthly basis, what are your connections with Ukraine, or how do you help from Slovenia in these efforts to rebuild Ukraine?
We've done a lot of work with Ukrainian women in helping them to find ways to support themselves while they're here in Slovenia. We've also done work with women who are looking for ways to contribute to Slovenian society, to find ways to be productive. So that's very successful. We have numerous initiatives to help the Ukrainian people in Slovenia.
Could you talk about these initiatives a bit? Maybe.
Well, just what I said, in supplying them with information about how to get work in Slovenia, finding jobs for them, providing essential items, clothing, food, that sort of thing.
It seems like that the war in Gaza is shifting priorities a bit all over the world. Following the US politics, the congressional Republicans are blocking at the moment the aid to Ukraine, the military assistance package. There are elections in November. The candidate that is leading the polls is the one that is sympathizing more with Russia than Ukraine. How much harder is your work for you here in Slovenia because of all of that?
My work continues regardless of what's going on in American politics, but let me give you a little insight about American politics. One of the greatest things about our political system and one of the most challenging things about our political system is the fact that everyone has a voice that can be heard. And so it can be messy, it can be noisy, but despite the noise that you hear, our priorities have not changed. Around the world, Ukraine, Israel, Gaza, we are not going to sacrifice one for the other. We're completely capable of engaging in diplomatic efforts and supplying Ukraine with the defense that it needs, and doing all of these things at the same time. The United States has over 300 million people, and we have the resources and the capability and the will and the determination to support people who share our democratic values. So for Ukraine, our support is absolutely vital. We recognize that. And in fact, just this week, the Senate passed a bipartisan bill for $60 billion for Ukraine. That's going to put us well over $100 billion if we can get the House to come together and do the same sort of bipartisan effort. But we've got to continue sustained levels of aid to Ukraine. And it's probably more vital now at this point in time than any other, because Ukraine has been able to take back 50% of the territory that it originally lost. It's holding back Russia at the front lines, but supplies are dwindling. And so it's critical that we get that aid to them as quickly as possible. If I could continue for just a second, there's a point that I feel like is probably the most important thing I can say, and that is that what we do or don't do now is going to affect us for generations. It's going to change our world, and so we need to be on the right side of history. And I believe Slovenia is in that place, America's in that place, the EU has come forward, as we said earlier, with $50 billion to support Ukraine. We've got the coalition of over 50 countries who stand united in support of Ukraine. So, you know, I think that the whole world is watching, friends and foes alike, and they should understand about American resolve and resilience, about our partners and allies' resolve and resilience to make sure that Putin does not win. Because if Putin wins, the terrible fact is that Ukraine will cease to exist, and he will be emboldened, and he will not stop at the borders of Ukraine. So that puts the national security of Europe and the national security of America at risk. So again, don't doubt our resolve. Don't let our noisy politics make you think that we're distracted from the ultimate goal. Thank you.
Thank you. Dr. Černčac, the latest news, this week we have been following the NATO-Ukrainian Council. It brought together the defense ministers to discuss assistance to Ukraine, including, and they emphasize that, including the non-defense assistance. Now, how much harder is a work for a state secretary at the Ministry of Defense in a country like Slovenia, where I don't think that the general public sympathizes so much with the military assistance as they do with humanitarian and other means of help?
Yes, I can basically take the same similar run as Ambassador just took. We are also democracy in Slovenia. We have different views, perspectives, attitudes, and as it was mentioned in 91, we were under embargo as a country, and we prevail at that war, and Slovenia is independent since then. It was fought, we fought the battle against the bigger adversary who sent also tanks in our capital on our border crossings, and we sustained and we won. And we were under embargo. Therefore, I'm personally, and I think a lot of people in Slovenia understands how important it is to support and help a country that is a victim of aggressor, a victim of a bigger aggressor, a country that is not democratic, while on the other hand, Ukraine is a country that decided by itself it wants to be a democracy and it wants to be a Western type of democracy. And this is their path. They are paying this gravely. Every day we see the casualty reports from the ground. And in Slovenia it's important that we are able to talk about it in this way. And in time of the needs, you see who your friends are. And I would like to remember also that this is a two-way track. And we saw that last year when we had these huge floods in Slovenia, the biggest national catastrophe in decades. And Ukraine, country at war, sent to Slovenia huge convoy with huge excavators who were immediately put in place in the Savinja River, started helping, preventing that this natural disaster that happened in Slovenia wouldn't have extra consequences. So country at war sent from Ministry of Emergency Situations a convoy to Slovenia to help Slovenes on the ground. So this is the best symbol of this two-way track of partnership that we have with Ukraine. And I have to mention also that, as you know, we made so-called ringtausch, ring exchange with circular exchange with Germany in regards the tanks we sent to Ukraine, and also United States done the similar with Slovenia. We purchased GLTVs, the armed vehicles, for the assistance that we provided to Ukraine as a compensation on behalf of the United States. And this is the clear example, and we also publicly presented this to Slovenian public. We said, so we are not commenting in details how we are helping with military assistance, but we put a clear message that we are doing this, and the biggest donations we presented to the public, and we also said it was done in accordance with our beliefs by our governmental decision, and of course also with the cooperation with the partners, as I mentioned, and also within what European Union is doing, and it was mentioned. So I'm not afraid of this discussion, just the opposite. I firmly believe we should be able to talk about it publicly, as we are doing, as we have done it just recently, and we are going to do it in the future. As I said, we are democracy, and we have to be open-minded about it.
Thank you. Dr. Groschel, Russia's war against Ukraine obviously impacted the EU politics and the EU policies. There is a new EU opinions poll out surveying 13,000 EU citizens across the 27 member countries. It's shown the European citizens' support for EU backing of Ukraine. It remains high, but support for delivering weapons is weakening, and majority of interviewed believe that the EU will face an economic burden as a result of Ukraine's reconstruction. What's your response to that?
Yeah. So the support still remains high, and that's important. This is a political aspect. The other aspect which is reflected in these public opinion polls is the fact that even though this is not popular to speak in Slovenia, this disinformation campaign is and it was very successful. Why? If you look what happened after the start of talks about accession of Ukraine to the European Union, the first articles emerged that if, and then there was this unfortunate interview of Jean-Claude Juncker with Politica, where he was talking about some perspectives, about time and so on. And the most outstanding issue, of course, was what will happen with cohesion funds and EU funds in general, because this is the issue where you can pick very hard if you want to have a political discussion in the European Union. This is one of the reasons why the extreme right in Europe will never work, because they will never agree what to do with European funds. Because one of them would like to have it, the other side would say, no, you don't have it. So this will be fun. But okay, let's go back to Ukraine. The issue is that there were no real economic or any kind of other analysis what will happen with potential and when it will happen with potential accession of Ukraine and Moldova to the European Union. Now there are coming up some more profound, more based and more methodologically sound analysis what it might happen. In general, we are now starting the accession process. The accession process means it will take time. So speaking about what will be the economic burden, this is like the following. There will be some expenses, but of course there will be also some benefits. There are not in any story, in any accession, in any enlargement process, there were benefits and some expenses. And this will be the one, at the end, this will be the balance which will at the end prove is it a success or not. For the time being, for so also for the European Union, as well as for the candidate country, whichever entered European Union, this was it was by the fact, the success story. None of these countries were poorer, and not the European was poorer at the end because of the accession of individual countries. Like there were discussions about Romania, Bulgaria, if you remember, they were conditional entering in the European Union. Now, when time passed, we see that this was a success story. So I would be cautious on this. Of course, there will be the manipulations, especially the far right is driving this very hard. This is one of their political topic. It's connected to the migration. We will see this farmers issue, It's very fine to talk about farmers, about the Ukrainian grain, how it's destroying the future of European farmers. Then they figured out this is not the case. Then we started with the Green Deal. The problem is that if we have some issues with the farmer, with our agriculture, that's the fact. But these problems are not from yesterday. They are spinning for quite a lot of time. So it started many years ago. So what is in front of us is something else, but is not related to Ukraine accession talks, neither to Ukrainian support. I would also like to mention, as it was mentioned by Mr. Ambassador, the help which is given by the European Union is manifold. So it's not only these 50 billions. This one is split almost in half for the, let's say, military support, half is for the financial support, for pensions, for social benefits, for accession, pre-accession activities, so that organization, institutions in Ukraine do reform in line what is expected with the candidate country status. I know there is a lot of discussion, and then there are also this help which is going through the European Peace Facility, so there is a help which is on the level of the member states. So there are many lines. There are also help which is coming from the institutions like European Investment Bank and so on and so forth. I know there is also one discussion which is also mentioned in this public opinion poll is, of course, the always famous question of corruption. Yes, we need to be very frank. Ukraine is now in a dire situation, and I'm always saying, if you can name me one country which is in war and there is no corruption, just name it. I don't see it. I don't see this kind of country. If you compare this, what is going with some other countries in the Western Balkans, and if you look their ranking on the international transparency list, so it's not that outstanding issue, actually. What we need to understand is the strategic aim is to stabilize Ukraine and make them possible to have a future and to decide so that can decide themselves what the future of Ukraine is. And this is what is our strategic aim. Of course, there will be many ups and downs on this way, but there are some strategic ways. We are facing now a little bit of crisis in European Union. There is some fatigue among the politicians because of the questions what will happen after the European parliamentary elections. As I said at the beginning, I'm much more optimistic as I was, let's say, a few months ago, because I see that this great wave of issues which might endanger future European support to Ukraine has now passed, and I think that we are now going to some other discussions which will be less devastating, let's say, for this strategic goal.
It's nice to hear that you are optimistic. There are EU elections at the beginning of June. The surveys do show that the far right might be gaining seats, and these are the parties and the people who are advocating what I just said, that helping Ukraine will be a burden to EU. So you are expecting that the numbers of those won't go up?
No, the numbers will probably go up, but this will not block the whole decision-making process in the European Union, what was one of the greatest hopes of Vladimir Vladimirovich. This will not happen. Why? Because, you know, the far right, the problem we are having in media space in Europe is that far right is perceived of something of very monolithic. In reality, you know, because they are talking about sovereignty, in the definition itself, in political definition, they cannot be monolithic. And this is now very clearly it shows, for example, where you have the case since Orban wants to join European reformists and conservatives, the Swedish far right doesn't want to join, you know. Then the issue is of European funds. Assemblée Nationale from France doesn't want to pay in the European budget, while Mr. Orban would like to have as much as possible from the European budget. So this is the story which is now, and this is how they will find the common ground. It will be very difficult. They might find a common ground on certain topics which might be a common ground, but on the general, I would say, no strategic issues, they are so deeply split that it's very difficult for them. And also in the case of Ukraine, this proved very strongly, you know. If you look what the Polish peace was doing, what Orban was doing, what, for example, Ms. Meloni is doing, so, you know, it's not black and white. It's, unfortunately, even though they don't like it, it's in the colors of the rainbow, you know, at the end.
Thank you, Dr. Groschel. Another question for you, Ambassador Taran, and then we'll go for questions from the audience. So if the numbers that I found are correct, since the start of the Russian invasion, more than 8 million Ukrainians have fled their homes, and feel free to correct me. Just over 70,000 of them have registered their residence in Slovenia, and according to the Ministry of the Interior, about 8,500 has been granted temporary protection status by the end of this month. So to help build Ukraine back, as you mentioned before, Ukrainians needs to come back home. That's not an easy job. Microphone.
Let me start with the numbers. As I said, according to our estimation, according to some Western institutions' estimations, we have about 6 million people left Ukraine. But it is impossible to calculate precisely because people are going out from Ukraine, they are coming back. Just recently, I found very interesting result of it was internet questionnaire for people who left Ukraine in social media here in Slovenia as well. The question was just one: when, if, and how you see your future life? Will you go back to Ukraine or you will stay in Europe? 60% of the asked people, 60, said we are already back in Ukraine. And only about 17% said, oh, we will see whether we should stay here or not. First of all, we have to find out where we can go back to Ukraine, because some people lost everything in Ukraine. They lost their homes, they lost their relatives. It's difficult. But at the same time, speaking just with my own experience, my son's daughter-in-law, right?
Mhm.
Daughter-in-law with my granddaughter, they left Ukraine because their house in Odessa was under the bombing. They came to Italy, then they came to Slovenia here, and the only question, they don't know about the future, but the only question they know for sure, we have to come back to Odessa. We have come back home. But in order to be able to come back, they need certain conditions. And one of the conditions is to be protected from the sky. We definitely need reliable air defense. Thanks to Western countries, we created certain umbrella, but it is definitely not enough. That is why in every meeting in Ramstein, in every meeting of our military and political leadership with the Western leaders, we ask, give us anti-defense, air defense systems. Then it should be created place where to live. Then it should be created what to do when we come back. So there should be working places. They have to get medical assistance provided to them. They have to have schools for their children. They have to see social infrastructure surrounding them. So there are many areas where the recovery will go. It's not just rebuilding, as I said, it's recovery. And the recovery starts with military support.
Thank you. Let's give us some questions. So if you have a question for members of our panel, please do hold your hand up, introduce yourself, and say who do you have a question with. So do we have any question? That's quite often that happens in Slovenia. When it comes to questions, no arms are raised. Completely different than my experience when living in the United States. There are immediately like tens of questions to be asked. Please, go ahead, yeah. Could you just take the microphone?
I just wanted to say, you had asked about the people that I worked with from Ukraine. In meeting those people, I agree with your point, Ambassador. They all, I say they all, your statistics may be slightly more fine-tuned than mine, but in talking to Ukrainians here in Slovenia, they all want to go back to Ukraine. They're incredibly brilliant and talented people, and they have so much to give, and they think about it constantly, about going back home and rebuilding their lives. And I think that once we get Putin's regime out of Ukraine and we secure Ukraine, I think the sky is the limit for what Ukraine can do, and I'm looking forward to seeing that day come.
You mentioned that everyone wants to come back home to Ukraine, understandable. I'm not offended as a Slovenian. Slovenia is
No, they love, actually they all tell me that they love Slovenia and they're trying to learn the language, but they find it much more difficult than Ukrainian. So, but they're making an effort.
Thank you. So, anyone? No, otherwise I will ask you for your final comments, your final remarks. So, it's going to be almost 2 years of the war in Ukraine. And the efforts to stop the war are going on. The efforts to try to rebuild the municipalities, the country back are also, there are lots of international cooperation and alliances that are working in that field. So Maybe start with Dr. Groschel, your final words.
I hope it's not a final, it's just concluding one.
Fair enough.
I'm not so fluent in English, so it was just a joke. Just to break the ice at the end. I would say that despite quite difficult conditions in which what is going on in the Ukraine, we need to be optimistic because I think that the European Union as such, as also the member states have, and also the public still understands that Ukraine deserves and needs our support. I know that we will deliver this support. There will be a lot of political discussion. There will be a lot of going on in the European Parliament, even in a new one. And I think that at the end, we will know what to do in the right way for the interest of the European Union, for the interest of our member states, for our people in the EU, and also the people of Ukraine.
Thank you, Dr. Černčec.
Yes, Natasha, you should pick, as usually we have, when we have some lectures, we pick volunteers for questions.
Yeah.
This is usually the way that it works in Slovenia. Just to continue where Klemen was finishing, I think that yes, Ukrainians are paying with this destroyed country, with the loss of lives daily. This is very tragic that we have to see this. Nobody anticipated, expected that we are going to see such a war in Europe in year 2022 or 24 that is going to last for 2 years, and more. We all in Europe were kind of, after 1991 or after also in Slovenia, we joined European Union and NATO, we tend to believe that we will have a perpetuum pace, eternal peace in the Europe. We are seeing tragically now that we are not having this. What we have to have is a strong commitment for the future that we will support Ukraine till the final victory. And this is the only and must goal that we have to have. And it's a question of values, as it is a question of geopolitics in Europe. It's a question of values. The democracies must not lose this. And this is on all of us a daily reminder that as long as it's going to take, at the end, the victory has to be ours.
Thank you, Ambassador Harpotlian.
I think I've said everything I wanted to say. I just will conclude again, as Dr. Černčec just said, we share common values of democracy, freedom. The idea of territorial sovereignty is absolutely essential for our democracies. I'd love to take a question, but I'll close with that.
Thank you to you too, and Ambassador Taran.
Well, first of all, I'd like to repeat my words about our gratitude to everyone who contributed in that support to Ukraine. And after 2 years of full-scale war, and after having 10 years of war started by Russian aggressors in Ukraine, against Ukraine, it is possible to say a few words about lessons learned. It is 2024, this is 21st century. Nobody expected such terrible things to happen at the beginning of this 21st century. In the heart of Europe, it was difficult to imagine. I remember some conversation with some mayor of some cities in Slovenia. I said, you continue to have such a close ties with Russia. Why? The answer was a little bit surprising for me. You can say whatever you want. I'm not involved in politics. I respect Russia as a big country, great country. I respect their culture. I respect their people. I will continue to have my close ties with Russia because this is really great country. The war in Ukraine, it was Bucha mentioned several times, showed terrible things which are deep inside Russian souls. The worst animal instincts, it is not civilized. War is always cruelty, but cruelty always goes on as a battlefield. But to do terrible things to the civilian population, to women, to children, to elder people, to kill civilians just for fun, for nothing, to rape mother in front of their children, to rape children in front of their parents. How it might happen in 21st century? Is a civilized nation. The lesson number one for me is we should eliminate the cause of this war. We should show that it is impossible to be unpunished for the terrible things you are doing. We should come back to the main principles of human life. We should show that the territorial integrity and right people for life is sacred thing. I don't know what will happen after the war, but I know for sure that lesson number 2 gives us the necessity to think about future security architecture. The existing security instruments in the world, with all the respect to the United Nations, to OSCE, shows that these structures, unfortunately, were unable to stop the war, to prevent the results of such war, to prevent the attempt from Russian dictator. I don't know how to call him. This is not the president of the country. This is a dictator. It's the worst thing of this world. This attempt to eliminate the right of Ukraine to exist, the right of Ukrainians to live in the way they choose for themselves, to continue to speak our own Ukrainian language, to continue to be proud of our Ukrainian culture. They are trying to eliminate all these things. They deny the right of Ukraine to exist. They, just recent statement, that recent interview of that Russian dictator shows that they consider us as part of herd under Russian rule. I don't know. They deny all our history. The third thing, the third lessons learned by the whole world is we should do something for our security. It gives many countries, including Slovenia, the opportunity to see differently on their security issues in their country. There should be more efforts to improve the armed forces, to make them stronger. We cannot choose the neighbor. We will continue to live next to Russia. So we should be able to defend ourselves in the future as well. We will restore peace sooner or later. We will restore the territorial integrity of our country, I believe. But we have to do something to prevent future aggression from Russia. Their mentality is still coming from the understanding we were a great empire.
Thank you very much, Ambassador, and thank you very much to all of you for taking some time out of your busy schedules, and thank you for sharing your thoughts with us. Thank you to you as well for being part of the discussion. It's time for a coffee break, but at 11:30 we'll continue with a fireside chat. Our guest will be a mayor of a Ukrainian municipality, Pereshchepin, Yaroslav Tsverkun. So see you then. Thank you.